Real quick before I forget, there is a LavenderTowne plush that you can order right now. It will be extremely limited edition. I love her so much. I think she turned out amazing, so definitely check it out if you're interested in something like that. Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today I want to talk about some character and writing tropes that just personally drive me crazy. Starting off with the redeemed just to die trope. Now, one of my favorite things in fiction, whether it's comic books, TV shows, movies, novels, you name it, is when we have to deal with a real legitimate character arc where a character actually grows in a significant way. I feel like this is becoming less and less common, especially with media that's directed more towards like families or younger audiences, including teenagers, where I feel like a lot of characters are much more stable, and any kind of character development they have is more them realizing that they didn't understand that they weren't really fighting for good. They were like misled by a villain or something like that. But in general, I'm not seeing as much character development where someone starts from a place of truly being like very flawed, very selfish, even doing like really horrible things where it's questionable if these things are even forgivable, and then actually throughout the story having to gradually like make amends, improve their life, break old bad habits and that kind of thing. I find that so fascinating, and I think that especially in fiction where, the victims aren't real, I think it's a good place to sort of like feel out how you feel as a reader about things like that and like what your sort of cutoffs are for forgiveness of other people. Anyway, this trope basically goes against any notion of this actually being a possibility by only redeeming characters who are right about to die. There are a lot of examples of this, so it is hard to talk about without spoiling major properties, but basically anytime a like quote-unquote evil character who has been really harmful and cruel to the protagonist switches sides right before being killed. This happens actually quite a bit, and the reason for that I think is actually a bit of a cop-out. The great thing about redeeming your character right before they die is that you basically trap them in amber the second that they decide to be good. By killing them, our last memory of them is them doing something selfish, turning against the evil side or whatever, and then they die, so they're now an inactive part of the story. So they are basically stabilized at that point. But the problem with this is you're basically killing them right at the start of their interesting character arc. And again, you're like avoiding all of these tougher topics about like forgiveness and like how do you redeem yourself after having done really, really bad things. How do we feel about characters who won't forgive this character even if they are trying to be better, and like, that's a valid thing as well. I think that those stories are so fascinating, and so this is why this is one of those tropes that really, really bugs me. It just feels like a total cop-out of actually developing your character by switching them from like bad to good and then dead, instead of having, the more like tangly, morally gray, kind of complex process of someone actually like becoming better and redeeming themselves over a long period of time. So I could give some examples. There's one in Star Wars, the more recent Star Wars story that if you've seen it, you know exactly who I'm talking about, who like basically is like, I'm good now, and then dead moments later. So yeah, to me this is just frustrating. It's kind of a waste of a possible buildup of a character actually having an arc, and so that's why I personally really don't like it. The next trope I really, really don't like is what I'm calling a meta shame of your own genre, or being embarrassed of what you are. Now, this is not to be confused with legitimate satire of certain genres, which both of the genres I'm about to talk about have excellent pieces of satire about them that I think are very compelling and interesting. But what I'm talking about is the sort of like hackneyed, ham-fisted, and self-conscious way that certain media writes about itself, specifically regarding Disney princesses and superheroes. Now, the Disney princess thing is really interesting because I've definitely noticed in more recent Disney princess type movies and stories, probably starting with like Tangled, particularly in Frozen. This is like the one that was most memorable to me, but it felt like Disney was kind of weaving into their very traditional Disney princess story a bunch of like bad faith critiques from the internet, like pure CinemaSins type like arguments and stuff. The thing that really sticks out to me is like Elsa being like, oh, you can't marry a man you just met. There's a lot of stuff where it feels like it's plucked directly out of a video essay of someone who just doesn't like fairy tales and doesn't like Disney princess stories, and the way that they sort of like plop it in there in kind of an inorganic way makes it seem like they're not comfortable with what they are, but they don't actually like subvert the story in any more meaningful way. I remember when Frozen first was coming out, there was a lot of conversation about how it was going to really flip the Disney princess idea, and it was going to be about, you know, the love of sisters rather than romantic love of like a prince or something. And then when I watched it, I was pretty disappointed because I felt like it was still very much attached to this idea of at least one of the girls finding a romantic mate. And, you know, like even though she is betrayed by one of her romantic interests, she still ends up with a partner, and it's like kind of the like end of the story. So even though like there is some subversion in the climax of that film, I still feel like they really do want to be a traditional Disney princess movie, which is why this like these little moments where they kind of reference maybe some like satire or criticism to the overall formula feels like not honest and not really what they're trying to do, but more a way to just like curtail some criticism. Whereas you compare it to something like Shrek, which came out like ages and ages before, which is actually like a comprehensive satire and conversation about Disney princess stories and fairy tales. You know, it's pretty clear which one actually wants to have a conversation about this and which one doesn't really, and is mostly just, I feel like, anxious about getting critiques from people. Same thing with superhero stories. There are some satire or like explorations of superheroes that are interesting. I think that Chronicle is a good example of this. I haven't seen much of The Boys, but it seems like The Boys is also doing this as well. Even, you know, like My Hero Academia has like some of what I would consider almost like a satire of like American superheroes. But when the superhero movies themselves actually do some of this, and they're like, you know, they'll be like, what, are you gonna call me a superhero? What, should I wear spandex? Are you gonna put me in some tighty whities? Like, these kind of jokes just make me cringe because it's like, you actually are a superhero movie. Like, if anything, it just feels like you're being kind of like rude to your fans, the people who are most likely to be watching these movies. And I feel like the jokes are never that funny or like really like cutting to the core of anything that's interesting or subversive about superheroes. So it just seems like a waste. I hate these kind of throwaway jokes, and I really wish that they would kind of stop, because personally I just find them kind of embarrassing. And also I just think like either really subvert what you are or don't even acknowledge it. Like, these like quick throwaway lines do nothing to actually like change any like hater's mind to the genre of superheroes or Disney princesses. So unless you're going to completely restructure your story to suit them better, then I think you should just earnestly love what you are and try to like be the best version of that particular genre. If you don't genuinely have an interest in like dismantling it, then don't like try to be in the gray area and please everyone. That's my personal feelings on it. The next trope I want to talk about is the character who is evil but only off screen. Now, for me, this is really frustrating, and it's really common in webtoons, and I feel like a lot of sort of like millennial vibes kind of media. I definitely didn't used to be bothered by this trope, but it has become so like everywhere that is really starting to bug me. And I realized kind of while I was writing and drawing this video why that is. Part of it is a show don't tell issue. So specifically, I'm talking about characters that are supposed to be incredibly evil. They're canonically like mass murderers or torturers, or, you know, like they're like the devil. They're like the most evil character you can think of. And then they subvert that by making them actually like very polite. Like maybe they're like a demon lord or something, when they kill and torture people or sinners or whatever, but then they're actually very polite, and whenever you see them on screen, like, they would never do anything that's like socially unacceptable, which is really funny because, you know, they're supposed to be so evil. I think that this juxtaposition may have been interesting at one point, but it's starting to go to a point where I feel like people are just using it because they like the aesthetics of an evil character, but they're not actually willing to create or write a character that people aren't going to like. And I feel like that's creating this really weird milquetoast type of character where they are supposed to be like incredibly scary and intimidating, but then you see them behaving in a way that would make them like a legitimately good person and friend. And I don't think that that's actually interesting. I think, again, it feels like a cop-out. One of the things that really frustrates me about this is that I actually do really love an evil character, and I feel like this proliferation of characters who say that they're evil and are supposedly evil off screen but are never actually behaving that way is stripping us of some legitimately terrifying villains. I think that the desire to make every character, including your villains, someone that fans can like sort of be obsessed with and love, are preventing people from actually like making them behave as villains in the actual narrative. I feel like real strong villains that are actually scary can be such a wonderful part of fiction, and you can make them really, really intense and feel very real if you're willing to actually make them do bad things and really think complexly about who they are and why they're doing the things that they're doing. But when you just kind of have this like bland concept of like evil in theory, but then you can't actually execute it in the actions of your characters when they actually are on screen, I find that very like disappointing and flat personally. Next, I want to talk about the trope of the two types of female characters, particularly in young adult fiction, but it's kind of everywhere, and that is where our character who has masculine interests and aptitudes naturally being more heroic, smarter, and more real, and the side character girls who are more traditionally feminine being shallow, stupid, and cruel, and often being like rivals or bullies to our main character. This is really common in webtoons as well, and I find it disappointing that this is even sort of being carried through to more like modern stories, because I did think it was starting to kind of die down. I do think that we need more female friendships in our stories, like legitimate ones where both the characters are like real people, it feels like, and they're different from each other but they genuinely support each other. But I still see a lot of women just being rivals to each other, and I really don't like this trend of making the girl who has like more violent or masculine traits automatically being the one who is more honest and smarter than the more feminine, delicate character. It's a really complicated thing. There's so many forces that push women to feel pressure to do or behave certain ways. And I feel like in this particular trope, it really is like diving into one of the things that makes it so difficult to feel like you're doing the right thing as a girl, because it's basically implying that if you actually like behave in a girly way, like a traditionally girly way, and you're interested in your appearance and stuff, that makes you like stupid or a bad person. But then the masculine interest character usually is very conventionally attractive, particularly in like movie and TV adaptations, but even like within the context of the books that we're talking about, usually this, you know, tomboyish type of like adventure girl also has like multiple guys falling all over her, so like you know that she's still appealing to the opposite sex and stuff. So it's very much like putting on a pedestal this idea of like being effortlessly beautiful and super capable and like, you know, being one of the boys but in a way that like is dreamy to them. It just feels like so regressive and lame. And I'm just sick of like female rivalries that like aren't more interesting than this, you know? This type of rivalry where it's basically just like a girly girl being mad that the hero is like naturally magnetic and good at everything, and then the hero girl not liking other girls because all the other ones are like stupid and have stupid interests because they're dumb girly girls. Like this, we need to leave this in the past. Like this is just not, this is not good and not interesting. That's how I feel about it anyway. So these were some of my biggest character tropes that I personally don't like to see in media. Let me know what some of yours are, and if you disagree with me on any of these, let's talk about it in the comments. I love talking about media and stuff, so thank you so much for watching till the end, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much to my members and patrons, including Among Us Skibbity, Kristen Kobitz, Kira Kira, Gold Pikachu, Skitten2, Yume Lily, Jamie C, Data, Misty Raven, Artist James, Loro, Foxglove, Random World, Lily McFarlane, Becca, Casey, Elliot Graham, Anastasia Eve Siva, Viet, Graveyard Moss, Grexiest, Olia, Maddie Momo, Brandon Stark, CB, Lucy Amajiki, Live Live, Ravens Crow, Zasalat, T Hill Music, Jabber Dabber Doo, Kadaria, Astral Fox Art, The Expressive Poker Face, Subaki, Cutie Pie, Ice Cream Pal, Kola, JJ Jade, and of course, blah 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 blah.